The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests as individuals, and do not necessarily reflect those of advertisers or sponsors. This show is intended as entertainment and commentary only. The producers strive for verisimilitude, but nothing said on this podcast should be taken as fact by the listener or viewer without performing due diligence. While generally considered safe for work by way of content, some language may be considered offensive by more sensitive viewers or listeners.
Existence, the physical universe, is basically playful. There is no necessity for it whatsoever. It isn't going anywhere. That is to say, it doesn't have some destination that it ought to arrive at.
I am on the right camera. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Keep Your Hat On, the show where we don't know where we're going.
No.
And it's been so long, I even screwed up the intro. So how's everybody doing? It's been a while since the four of us have talked. We did do a recording session a while ago, but honestly, there wasn't enough there. I didn't want to bother you. So, hey, it's the new season. It's our 8th season, I think. I'm not entirely certain. But yeah, what's going on, guys? How is everybody doing?
I'm just exhausted.
I don't know if I have my crickets or not.
I'm mentally and emotionally exhausted, and I am waiting for Tuesday.
I think you're not the only one.
Yeah, and we're not going to not be able to not be not political.
You know,
Hey, look, nobody that watches us or listens to us or
I think we're
are
okay.
friends of us, they know who we are. We do have a skin in this game, as it were, and we have a side that we're on. But I feel you, Chris, in that it's interesting. Oh, there you go, Mark. That's okay. Even better. There.
you see Shiva back there dancing his way into Tuesday.
Yeah, right. Here, let's say this. I think we can all agree that we're not going to know who the president is Wednesday morning.
No.
Count on it.
Yep.
Everything, all the pundits that I've seen, everything, it's so narrow a margin already that there's number one, as far as I can see, unless some polls were really wrong, there's no direct path to 270.
Yeah,
and
I'm going to stick my neck out and say I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that we're not going to know right away.
Well, what I'm saying is that they're not going to let us know.
Maybe.
And I mean, one side of this equation, I'm nervous in my boots.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb here too, and I'm having a weird little. This is whistling past the graveyard. I'm almost also sure about that. But when we went to vote, we went up here to the UW campus, and this was last week, to vote early. And the place was literally packed with college students. And here and across the rest of the country, the registrations among 18 to 25-year-olds are just through the ceilings. And as a rule...
Yeah, so goes.
As a rule. Now, having said that, and I'm also getting suspicious. I'm deeply suspicious. I'm going to have to talk to my friends in statistics about how they can even do polling now, because I mean, it's like my phone doesn't even let anybody through. And a few years ago, once I've done like phone calls for candidates, in the past few years while they're cell phones, and you don't get anybody, right? My phone doesn't even let anybody through. Yeah. So I don't even know how they're doing the polling. I have no idea how they're doing the, adjusting the factors and stuff to accommodate that kind of weirdness.
I'm incredibly skeptical of the vast majority of the polling that's out there. However, the Seltzer poll that dropped today in Iowa is mind-blowing.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually brought that up to a friend of mine yesterday, that the Iowa poll is surprising in a number of different ways.
Oh, this is the one where Harris is way ahead?
Not way
she's
ahead.
up by
Right
3.
ahead. I'm kind of not surprised about this. This is where I was headed. And I'll just finish my original thought, too. Sorry.
Yeah,
It
please.
was simply
Sorry.
that I have this weird little, and again, whistling past the graveyard thought that we might see quite a big victory for Harris. I mean, bigger than anticipated.
Yeah.
But if that happens, what we can know for sure is that Mr. Trump is going to declare victory on Tuesday night before California comes in.
That's assumed.
So
already.
there you go. That's all I mean.
Yeah,
I'm surprised he
baked
hasn't
into the
proclaimed
equation.
victory now.
He should have.
Stop counting, right?
Yeah. But you can stop counting. You can do it. It's fine. All the votes. I've got the most votes. I think that's kind of where my mind has settled now. It's either going to be razor thin and contested forever, or it's going to be a surprisingly lopsided blowout. And you know what? If it does, and I'll say this in fairness: if Harris gets elected, we have two contingents to thank. One is the college students, that they have been motivated in this campaign unlike any since Obama's first election.
Oh,
be
sure.
fair.
For sure.
And number two, women.
Yeah.
Because watching that other side of the aisle try to appeal to women in this has been
my God.
one of the most cringe-inducing.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, and you know,
We'll take care of you whether you like it or not.
Yeah, wow. I mean, if that's not abuser language.
Real
What type?
cringy things. There's been a few real cringy things that he's said.
It's
When
been
he
all
said,
cringe
Kamala,
from that
all of a
side.
sudden she's black. She didn't used to be black.
Oh, yeah. I mean, seriously, if we could sit here going down the list of cringe-inducing stuff, on top of, the last one, grab him by the pussy and all that business, we thought that was enough.
I was kind of done there. Yeah, I will say.
Yeah,
You don't know
exactly.
how
And for me, and for me, when
when he was making fun of the reporter,
it should have ended with a disabled reporter. With him, fuck you from the disabled community. Thank you very much. But now this whole new litany of, childless women, childless cat moms.
Go after Taylor Swift.
Well,
Right?
and suggestions that breeders' votes should count for more than.
The whole breeder angle thing
it's
is made me
weird.
so wow.
This is the Elon Musk cray-cray, right?
Well,
To step back and put this into because I've been pondering this just the last day or two, and I mean I'm so baffled, and I'm having a hard time absorbing just how colossally baffled I am, because looking objectively at what we have seen this entire summer into the fall is one campaign has run arguably the worst, most fumbling, bumbling, incompetent campaign in the history of U.S. campaigning for the presidency. And the other has done, I won't say it's the best campaign ever, but it's certainly hit its marks every step of the way without any major...
There were a few missteps. There were a few things that I would have liked to have seen handled differently, because I think that they would have kept that momentum going a little bit more. There were times when the Harris campaign kind of stumbled, but there's no. See, I'd love to say that there's no deal breakers from them, because I mean, in my mind, there's not. But again, going back to the fact that there should have been 200 deal breakers over the past 8 years for another side of this equation, and it just apparently it's not important enough to say no to a candidate because of all their indictments or their convictions or their.
And that's there is to that point there is
Hold on, Chris. Chris. Ty, what are you saying?
I was going to say, with on the back of what you were saying, it just strikes me as odd to hear somebody say, "Well, I'm still on the line." Well, what do you like about Trump?
Oh yeah, the whole
I like
fence
his
sitters thing
policies.
at this point, right?
What,
Yeah.
What?
How can you possibly be undecided at this point?
And what would it take? What would it take to put you off one candidate or another at this stage?
Oh my gosh!
With everything that's been said.
Did you see the Stephen Miller
The irony is I've asked this question.
press conference?
So I've asked some of the Trump people.
I'll come back to you, Ty.
Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't even hear you, Ty.
You're still down a little bit low,
I don't
Ty.
know why I'm coming in so damn thin.
Now you're fine. There you go.
Okay.
Yes, is it. You need to get that mic
gotta be, like,
much closer to you.
Swallow
There.
the microphone.
Yes, exactly. That's what you're supposed to do. I should be able to see that mic in camera. That's how close it should be to you.
Did we
Anyway,
all see Mr. Trump, by the way, masturbating the microphone? Did we see that?
You didn't see me
Yeah.
doing that, mocking
Was that
that
what
a
it was
moment
just
ago?
now? It's like,
Yeah.
so again, but anyway, I asked the Trump people, I've talked to a few supporters, and I've just said, what can you tell me? What can you say to me that would convince me to vote for him? I mean, what policy positions, what anything? Let me listen. And there's no answer to this question.
That's because they don't actually give a shit about policy.
I think that's right now.
anybody that was
You want to, and they keep
On
on
the
beating
fence?
us over the head with this culture war idea.
Well, yeah.
I agree. There is absolutely a culture war happening. And
There is.
all the shells are coming from one side.
I was just discussing this with some friends earlier, and you're absolutely right. And what it may well be about is, and I'm paraphrasing what one of my friends pointed out and suggested, and apparently there were some articles written on this and some research, but what it is there is this segment of the American population that feels like educated, intellectual, urban elites are looking down at them, laughing at them, see them as lesser. Now, whether that's true or not, that's their perception.
Definitely.
And what Donald Trump provides for them is an avatar and a voice to fight back against that.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up, Chris, because, and I'm not expecting any of you to have a photographic memory of our conversations, but I actually mentioned that a number of months ago, where I was just like, one of the things that I think that is causing the greatest rub is that we tend to understand satire on this side of the aisle. Okay? And that satire, when done properly, is not a personal attack. But they have, over the last, and honestly, this really, I will go all the way back to Rush Limbaugh at the beginning of, the end of the 80s. Because it's their punditry that is telling them they're looking down on you.
Yeah.
They're making fun of you.
Yeah.
And so, Chris, I think you're absolutely right. Mark,
I can't actually take credit for it. It's a new idea that I'm processing myself.
No, I'm just saying that you were right to bring it up. Mark, you were going to say.
Oh, what's her name? No, we had a professor at Madison, Kathleen. It's going to kill me in a minute. But who wrote a whole book about resentment as the grounds of what we've been seeing. And I go back to Nietzsche for this, terrifyingly enough, because if you look in the genealogy of morals, Nietzsche goes off on people who are dependent on a morality that appeals really primarily to their own sense of resentment against people in power. Mm-hmm. And Kathleen Cryer, it'll come back to me. It's not Cryer. Anyway, she wrote a great book about resentment as the ground of this. And if you take it away from, so, and you get this with Limbaugh, you get this with Alex Jones, you get this with, who's the latest one? Glenn Beck. It's the same thing. It's
Tucker Carlson.
They're laughing at you. They're against you. By the way, and we have to be honest about this. Part of this is the Democrats' fault because they went ahead and jumped into this. And if Hillary had kept her mouth shut about deplorables, she might have won the election, right?
Yeah.
And it's
and you got Biden saying everybody that follows Trump is trash.
Anyway, you get the idea here. And so this resentment thing is a long-term problem. Oh, yeah. So we keep looking for the silver bullet, though, Chris, right? It's like, what in the hell is going on? One of my friends on Facebook wrote back, I was making some joke about how, Trump is rambling off into the ozone now. And he wrote, no, Trump, he said, what if it's the case that Trump knows he's speaking to children? What if that's the case? And so all he has to do is talk like, their favorite high school teacher who allows them to misbehave, or their favorite grammar school teacher, or kindergarten teacher, as long as he speaks in this soothing, ice cream laden voice, that's all they care about.
Well,
I'm just thinking out loud here, but
no, and you're connecting to something that's been in the back of my mind this whole summer and possibly longer. I remember reading, and yeah, I'm gonna break the cellophane on it. I remember reading a book on this was some time ago. I mean, this was decades ago that I read this. Why Hitler was so effective. And it was his voice. And there was something really unique about his voice that actually resonated in a certain way with his audiences. And it was unmatchable.
I don't remember the name of the book, but I remember that book coming out. I remember that premise. It was right before the millennium. It was like 97, 98. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is that when you watch the films of Hitler and you watch, and boy, I can't believe we've literally crossed over and now we're talking Hitler. This is the world we live in now. That you're right, but we all thought that was comical, but that's because we don't speak German. Mm-hmm. And you want to talk about something getting lost in translation. Yeah, for us, it looks cartoonish. To the German speakers, it is really a different level of eloquence and emphaticism that he was able to bring. And that's why we all hear, and it doesn't make any sense to us when they go, well, he was so charismatic. We go, he was a buffoon. But the cultural gate between buffoon, and that's the reason why so many people say that Wagner is just overblown and just silly, and but to the German people, Wagner is just the height of things. Yeah, das Tannhausen and the Nibelung and those things. Yep. That speaks to their cultural history. Yeah. And we don't get it. And it's okay to not get it. But when you don't get something, immediately parodying it or, making fun of it, all that does is breed resentment. And that's why months ago I was saying, maybe we should stop making fun of them. Yeah. And insist that it be about, insist that our discussion and discourse be about something.
I thought early in the campaign, I think, and they did this pretty much right away. Biden was trying to do it, but of course ineffectively because of his own issues. But they immediately turned the conversation to us. And actually Tim Walz did this. It's like, look, this whole stuff, this is about getting kids lunch and breakfast so they can function in school. And the minute you pinned it down to like these issues, that's when they really started to crank up the culture war. My own working hypothesis for the last forever, let's go back to Ronald Reagan, has been that the function of the culture war is to keep people preoccupied so they don't pay attention to the economic class war that's actually been going on and has been won by people like Elon Musk. You know, when I was 18, there wasn't a guy in America who could afford to go to the fucking moon, right?
No.
How do you do that? And the answer is when you have enough money. And how did he get enough money? And the answer is he didn't have to pay taxes for the last 40 years, right?
Yeah.
And billions of dollars in U.S. government funding.
Well, and he built it on the backs of the workers at the companies that he bought.
All that.
I mean,
And it's still, for me, the whole thing, the SpaceX thing is very, very complicated because, I mean, there's no question. I was an early adopter in this idea that the privatization of getting to space was probably going to be a good idea. And part of the reason why is because I felt that as a nation, we lost the will to invest in space. Everybody already had their phones. Everybody was already able to benefit from, memory foam mattresses and stuff like that. And, we don't want to pay for that,
we like that.
Exactly. Tang is some good shit, man.
Tang.
Tang with vodka gets the job done. But, now I don't know if, I'm sure you guys either saw it or are familiar with what happened, but SpaceX did their latest launch to orbit of Starship and caught that massive lower.
Yeah.
Caught it. Picked it out of the fucking air. And that's why I say I cannot stand Elon Musk. I think he is a sludge pot of a human being.
It's true.
But SpaceX is now where our best and brightest are.
Well, and I think we need to break those two things apart. I mean, I think that's the only way to navigate this. Same with Tesla, same with, anything Elon has touched, with the exception of X. We have to separate the megalomaniac from the businesses, the companies.
I just feel so bad for all those people that work there because it was so embarrassing. You are one of the most intelligent engineers or whatever job description you have. Yeah. And yet your boss, your CEO is an absolute shit-stained clown who is just pretty much illustrating the worst of humankind, while at the same time saying, we need to get off this planet, man. There's no planet B. Well, look, let's shift gears here for the remainder of our because I can feel
what's left of our sanity. We could probably.
It's already been a bit of a day, and I don't need my pulse any higher. Chris brought up an interesting topic that I wanted to talk about because it's something that I've been seeing more and more of lately, and that is, and you know what? This isn't that far of a deviation from politics, if I'm being honest. And that is this idea that in life, anything that attracts attention and is loved by many people has a fandom that follow it. Oh. And 99 times out of 100, the fans ruin it. Fans are the things that make being a fan of something a miserable experience. You know what I mean? The biggest one, the one that you mentioned, Chris, which is kind of currently in an up cycle, is Star Trek. The idea of new Trek versus original Trek versus, NTG, all that. Oh. And, the OG of this is Star Wars, the Star Wars fan, the comic book guy, But honestly, it goes to wherever this happens. And, back in Dr. Mark's day, there were fans of genre. It was the Monty Python people versus the there
was no verses mostly,
or it was Asimov versus Bradbury,
Yeah, mostly like that, right? Or Heinlein, I think would be
or Heinlein.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do have one opinion about this, and that is that it has definitely been fanned by the internet, the existence of the internet.
All right.
Because now a bunch of oh no, I was just going to say
Where are you
sad
going with
loners,
this,
but I
Andrew?
didn't.
It's like you're off my grid here completely.
No, it's okay. The internet gives people a place to go have this argument that wouldn't have it before.
That's true, right?
Yeah. So see,
And
I did
without
bring it back in for a landing.
Yeah, okay.
But I don't know. Let's, Chris. What's your experience been lately about this? You're the one that brought this topic up.
Yeah, to fill in a little more sort of color on what inspired me to bring this topic forward is, I've become more aware of it, and I don't know that it's actually increasing. I think it's been around for a while. But it's this debate in the Star Trek world of old Trek versus new Trek. But then but I look beyond that, and that one, that one is manifesting at its simplest of one part of the fandom going, when did Star Trek become so woke? And the other part of the fandom, the old school fandom, like myself, who grew up watching the original series, and you guys as well. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's always been
talking about, Willis.
I mean, it almost got taken off
Can we
of
still
the
use
air.
that, Mark? Is that still appropriate?
I don't know if that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but Chris, you're absolutely right. Roddenberry was famously a utopist.
Yeah.
And as you also were pointing out, and it had been mentioned a couple different times in the podcast here, it was almost taken off the air.
Oh yeah.
Famously, Nichelle Nichols was going to bail after the first season and was talked into staying by none other than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
And so, this idea that when did it become woke? The real question is, whatever made you think that being a better person was not the basic underlying thread of this entire canon?
I don't know.
Right. And being curious rather than afraid. Right. So to put a pause on Star Trek for just a second, I'm seeing a lot of spillover into other realms of fandom that are very similar. You see a lot of that with Star Wars. Oh, Disney is making Star Wars too woke.
So these are you're talking about the complaints about they're woke, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's a big part of it, but I think a big part of it is more that, I think at the root of the woke thing, it's not actually that they're really complaining about it being woke. I think they're complaining about it not being what they think it should be. That the newer material is going in directions that they didn't expect, they wouldn't have chosen. And for example, with Star Wars, I cite the Acolyte really got smashed by the fandom. And it's like, okay, on one hand, you can criticize the Acolyte because it's just bad writing. I mean, it was just badly written.
That's what I heard.
And I think that's a fair criticism. I think that is a realistic criticism. And it's like, but that's okay. There's room for bad writing because for me as a Star Wars fan, what I love about Star Wars is George Lucas created this playground, this environment with this set of rules and this sort of culture and society that you could play within and you could tell different kinds of stories in. And you're going to see people taking it, picking it up and and making it their own and telling their stories in that context. And
well, you know what's
great.
interesting though is that really when you come around to this idea that fans say that somebody is ruining their favorite thing, that thread gets chased all the way back to Lucas ruining it.
Sure.
You remember when episodes 1, 2, 3 came out and everybody was just like,
what were you thinking?
Yeah, well, and I mean, look, I think we have to be fair and all agree that there was a major issue with Jar Jar Binks.
Yes, we can own that.
All right. But at the same time, there's this interesting phenomena. I don't know if it ties into this idea of parasocial relationships that I've been kind of chewing on over the last year or so. But this that fans feel that they're entitled to almost like an ownership stake.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the places I was headed, was when you devote yourself to a fandom, you start to feel a sense of ownership because
and then what happens to
in the game?
And what happens to your personality when suddenly, and I mean, we're starting to see this now it's popped up in a couple different places. You've got Joss Whedon not being a good person. We now have Neil Gaiman.
What?
Oh,
no.
Yes.
I'm just so out of it.
Yeah, and you know, and of course, you know, I mean, the biggest example of this, of course, is J.K. Rowling and you know, the Hogwarts Potter world, and you know, these people. And this all spins around to, you know, the art and the artist, and where is the line? But this idea that you have a right to be angry about somebody else's artistic direction and their storytelling. That kind of breaks something in my head.
Yeah, it doesn't compute. I mean, at least not in any linear fashion.
When it comes down to, for me, I mean, because there's, and we did this a number of episodes ago with this, idea of art and artist and problematic people that you like their art. Like I say, for me, a lot of them is been, people like Warren Zevon, people like Hunter S. Thompson, right?
Right.
But I don't have a parasocial relationship with them, both by way of the fact that they're deceased, but also I wasn't of age. I was a second generation lover of those things. And but like Chuck Close, I'm a big fan of Chuck Close's art. I'm not a big fan of Chuck Close as a person, because it turned out that he was a terrible person.
Yeah.
Do I have to now? And I guess this is coming back around to it. Do I have to now hate the art? Do you, if you suddenly think that the thing that you are a fan of is now woke, can you not enjoy it anymore?
Yeah. And I mean, if I could jump in, I'm trying to leave space for you other guys to jump in too. But for me, it's like if it speaks to you and you connect with it, what does it matter?
There's got to be a line, though, because I'm sure there are some people who really thought that Mein Kampf was well written. It was a page turner. So, I mean, that's obviously an extreme, but
Sure.
Here, yeah, let's, Chris, you and I, we've had this. Ty, Mark, say something else about this. I don't care what it is, just so long as it's not woke.
I'm sorry. Were you saying something? No, it was a joke.
I?
Mark.
Not a time for it.
Apparently not. Apparently
Jump in with an opinion, maybe.
We're taking the fan thing really seriously here, and I'm sorry. For me, it's like, Jimmy Page may have done some, Led Zeppelin may have done some really questionable.
And that's kind of what I was hoping that you'd go with, because
nasty
this certainly exists in the musical world.
But and we've talked about this before. This is a whole different stratosphere. When you get to that level of fame, rules are different, things are different. It just looks different.
Move that mic in front of you further.
Yeah,
none of us
really
can
having
really
a hard
hear you.
time hearing you.
Yeah, it just looks
right there.
different. But
By the way, you sound great now.
Certainly, there's some questionable things that are going on there. That went on backstage, but does that mean that you are now going to stop listening? I mean, it's just like Michael Jackson, right? Michael Jackson's dead. You're not really supporting him by listening or by buying those recordings. And regardless of what you think of him, he did some really interesting stuff. He did some groundbreaking stuff, and some of the stuff is kind of good. But just because he was of questionable character doesn't mean that, because especially with music, right? As a musician, I'm invoking feelings that are inside you already. And you like those feelings that I'm invoking, and then that's why you're continuing to listen, right? Who cares what I'm doing when I put the instrument down? It's that recording that makes you feel that way, that brings those memories back. That's what's important, not the person and what kind of a bumbling idiot they might be. Right?
See, but I can't entirely agree with that. And that's the thing that I'm fascinated by. Obviously, what you said for the most part is
you're supporting them by buying that music, by doing that stuff. That might be something that you want to talk about, you want to think about. Do I really want to support this person?
But our idea of the red thread, dude, that it goes back to the originator, and to bring back Wagner. There were so many people that loved his music until the Nazi kind of stuff. It's not black and white. That's what I'm trying to say. It is not a black and white thing. And even, fandom, I don't think is a black and white thing. Because
it's really
I think
silly,
that this
right?
might really go back down to the tribalism gene
like
that we all have.
It's like asking you, who's the best guitarist? Hendrix or Clapton? There's no answer to that. There's no answer. That's up to your preferences. It's so subjective.
Bruce
right?
Coburn, Tommy Emmanuel.
Yeah. Right. What's your favorite Beatles song? Well, that's going to change from day to day.
Yeah.
You're right.
There's a problem. There was a really good conversation. I don't remember where I saw this. It was probably on Netflix or Showtime or something, between all these comedians. I think it was Chris Rock was involved in it. Maybe with, I think he was talking. It might have been with Comedians in Cars with Jerry Seinfeld, and they were talking about whether it was okay to like Cosby anymore.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And for them, that's a big deal. I'm glad you bring
this up. Comedy is another place where this whole phenomena is really interesting.
What's his name? Who's the guy who got thrown out for masturbating backstage just recently? Like a couple of years ago.
Oh.
Anyway.
Well, you're not talking about Louis C.K.
Yeah, Louis C.K. Yeah.
Oh, a little bit more than just
it was
that,
bad.
Regardless.
But this was a really good question. It's like, because all those guys, of course, had internalized Cosby. And it's like, people my age is like, I can repeat the Noah bits still to this day, right?
Yeah, and I still put a hole in my muffler with a screwdriver.
And they're still hilarious. And there's a great line, and I was just looking online to see if I could find out who said it, and it wasn't me, but it was, you should always trust the art, not the artist. And, this is another problem, because I really still love Woody Allen's movies, right? And, Woody's made some really interesting choices over the last, decade. And so I don't know, can we? And it's like, so if we push this to the extreme end though, and this is where it gets troubling for me, and I don't have to fight these academic battles anymore, which means now I will.
Right?
The woke stuff, it does happen that it turns out that essentially everybody, and this means men, who wrote anything, history, philosophy, science in the Western cultural tradition going back 3,000 years, was a chauvinist, right?
Sure.
Who denigrated women and minority people, and the stuff that gets said about Africa in the West is off the charts, right?
Right.
So do I get to talk about, and I've literally heard this conversation, do I get to talk about Immanuel Kant anymore?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Do I get to talk about Plato or Aristotle?
Yeah.
And this is like, so Plato's really complicated. I've seen comments from women philosophers who should know better complain about Plato being a sexist when Plato provides one of the first and best descriptions about why women should be treated equally to men.
Yeah.
So, but the cultural context of these conversations is just off the fucking chart. And what's her name? Crosspoints? I can never remember her name. The trans philosopher woman on YouTube, who is just a freaking genius on this topic.
She is. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll look her up and put her in here.
Right.
Somebody Google that. Well,
I'm doing it.
Crosspoints. But anyway, she did a whole hour and a half on J.K. Rowling and J.K.'s, complete freak out about transsexual peoples, and she did a really intelligent job about this, because we're not done talking about this yet, and we just never had a good conversation. I have, for the record, I have a number of former students who I really respect and who are perfectly intelligent people who have transitioned their genders. And my favorite one is, and Bill, I'll mention you just by first name. And I asked Bill, who I knew when Bill was a girl, I should say woman, but really just when he was still just a girl. And I asked him, I said, Bill, what the fuck, man? And I love Bill's answer. He goes, I know, right? And it was like, oh, we're done. But all this stuff is the tribalism and the sort of background woke material and stuff is really out of hand. It's a tribalistic response to, and I still think it's about avoiding really more important issues. If I trace this back philosophically, and of course you guys can just toss this as you like, but the big themes of oppression in Western civilization for the last 200 years have been gender, race, and class, right?
Yeah.
And so oppression of women, okay, got it. Race, yes, we did that one too, and we spent a lot of time talking about that. But the one that we don't want to talk about still to this day is economic class. Yeah, that's the one. That's the forbidden. That's the forbidden dance.
That is the third rail.
You know what I mean? And it's like, in a weird way now, what I think has happened, and this is, call me the crazy Marxist, although I'm not, but call me the crazy. He got some things right.
We'll just call you the crazy Mark.
Crazy Mark.
Yeah, that's fine. Just stop it right after the Ixist. But he got some stuff right, and this fetish of capitalism is so thoroughgoing that we don't see it, right? That's the thing. And so I have a suspicion that all this talk about race and gender and stuff, which is important, is really just cover for economic class. Because what certainly happened, and again, this is just my take on it, but what certainly happened, I've gotten fixated on one number for the last 20 years now, which was that after 1980 and the ascension of the free market cult, the trickle-down economics people, middle-class wages have been stagnant since 1980.
Yeah.
Despite the increases in production and all the rest of that, middle-class wages about the same they were. So, if I were working in manufacturing, I'd be pissed off about this. And they had
you wouldn't be, because there is no such thing as manufacturing in America anymore.
Well, that's another reason. But it's like the one thing they can't blame is the economic system, because even though they're at the bottom of it, they're bought into it.
And not only that, that side over there keeps on screaming up and down about the whole economic thing, To be perfectly honest, they've had their way for the last 30 years. If you think that we are all benefiting from some democratic liberal idea of controlled markets,
No.
there hasn't been an effectively controlled market since Reagan lit that fuse.
Yeah.
And started decentralizing, and
we haven't seen what. I see. I'm just enough older than you guys to remember that my first vote was for Jimmy Carter in 1976, and when there were actual Democrats. My grandpa worked for Hubert Humphrey. Those guys were the people I thought of as Democrats. There haven't been any Democratic presidential candidates since 1980. Bill Clinton was a moderate Republican. Obama was a moderate Republican, which made him completely tolerable to me. Because it meant he knew how to do math and was socially liberal.
It's hard not to like a neoliberal politician. That's
but we
by
don't have,
design.
But the lie that we had Democratic candidates to me is just ridiculous.
We honestly haven't had true Democratic. In my mind, Carter was the last one. Mm-hmm. Everybody since then has been a performer on a stage with a blue curtain, and that's. You know,
I want to give some love to Joe Biden here, though, just before I stop. And the reason is that Joe called out trickle-down economics. Yes. And it's like I almost had a heart attack. It was like this is the first time I've heard any Democrat say that since 1979.
It has been a goodly while, Chris.
Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
The one challenge I'll issue to that is I'll say the last truly Democratic candidate for president was Gary Hart, and he was slaughtered.
Well, Bernie Sanders, by the way. Bernie is a real Democrat.
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
And that's just it. We now have the point where Bernie Sanders is a real Democrat, but is being accused of being something else.
Yeah, well, and he's isolated out on the fringe, right? He's distanced, and he's put out
because he's doing what Democrats used to do. He's doing what Democrats had as their tentpole, and that is calling out shenanigans.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, and we just, like you're saying, Mark, we don't do that anymore. Everybody always runs around in fear of saying the thing that should not be said. When what we really want is for somebody to come out and say it.
I think so. I'll wax a little philosophical just because this is the other thing. And thank you for the therapy, guys.
They didn't take your license away.
Send me the bill. No, I'm an emeritus now.
Right?
I got an extra word
with even less a piper to pay.
I know. So here's where I keep going back to. At the end of, and it's just really funny to me, it just cracks me up about myself because I was a fairly modern and sophisticated philosopher, and over the years I've regressed to become a Platonist. Yeah, gone back to Plato and Aristotle. It's like, really? Okay, well, here's my point. The original title of Plato's book, the famous one, The Republic, that is not the title. The title is Politeia in Greek, and Politeia literally translates as constitution. And this is a pun because the Constitution, it doesn't mean like the piece of paper. It means like you were talking about the Constitution, the psychological constitution, right, of a society or person. Yeah. And he makes this really powerful point, and I'm just completely blinded to this now, so I should this is like a total bias. I'm completely in the tank on this. He makes this really interesting point that the constitution of a society reflects the constitution of the individuals in the society, and the constitution of the psychological makeup of the individuals in the society mirrors the constitutional psychological makeup of the society itself. And so, for instance, we can say things like, are Americans the way they are because they live in America and grew up as Americans, or is America the way it is because it's filled with Americans? You get this chicken and egg thing?
Yeah. And it's kind of both.
It's kind of both, and it always is. And so what this means, though, is what I just said earlier, which was that whatever the political system is, whatever the constitutional situation is in a given state, the constitution of the state and the constitution of the people in it mirror each other. And that means that the people in a just society would be just, and the people in an oligarchic society will all be oligarchic, right? And the people in a tyrannical society will all have a tyrannical soul. which means that, so what that means is that, so why are all these blue collar workers voting for people who don't have their economic interests at heart? And the answer is because the constitution, the psychological constitution of our state, is oligarchic, right? And so no matter where you end up in the society, you still believe it's a just society. So even the people the shit kickers at the bottom, who are shoveling the shit for the people at the top, they still think that the people at the top are okay, because that's in their own minds, that's the way things are supposed to be. So, you can translate this into abusive relationships too, right? Mm-hmm. People who've been in abusive relationships forever, if they get into a healthy relationship, they don't know how to cope with that. And they start blaming the people who are making them healthy for trying to screw up their lives. So that's where we are. Anyway.
Here's a curveball. And it ties back to our supposed original topic. Do you think that we've moved into a new place now where politics is in and of itself a kind of fandom where the fans ruin it? Because I start thinking about, the obvious thing that you have to say is, because if it weren't, we'd all be talking about policy. Mm-hmm. We would all be talking about, did this thing actually turn out the way somebody intended it to, versus, and I just keep coming around to this new weird thing that we got now with Musk, where we've got the world's richest person. Is he still? I don't know what time it is. But one of the world's richest people who is literally buying a stake in an election. And he's got fans. He's got fans. He doesn't have people who follow him and respect him.
Worshippers.
Exactly right. And, Mark, you bringing up the oligarchy. And that's just it. Is this now, are we devolving into this place where it's fans of oligarchs and there's no discussion of policy whatsoever? And I think that we can also say this on the Democratic side as well.
Oh, yeah. Of course, right? And I think... So my first thought, of course, is this is exactly why the founders of the people who wrote the Constitution wrote it the way they did. It was to make sure that the people really couldn't control the place, right? You have to remember, originally the only people you got to elect were representatives.
Yeah.
Right. Senators were elected by the states. Right. The president was elected by electors. And so the Constitution is set up to make sure that the people really don't, there can't be this kind of mob mentality taking over the government. Now, this is a problem.
I'm sorry. That was out loud.
But yeah, I mean, that's the problem. The gases of the mind and the gases of the bowel are akin. And
it's one root between the two of them. And I mean, I think
so. I don't know. Chris was going to say something.
Yeah, Chris,
I actually want to hear
right.
what Robert has to say about abusive relationships as a way of understanding our politics now.
The comment I was going to make is simply this oligarchy and fandom is most simply and clearly and almost sort of haiku poetically expressed every time someone opens their mouth and says, I'm supporting him because he's a good businessman.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's you can't do that unless you're in the cult.
Right. Well,
you got to have swallowed the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. But that's it. They've bought this idea that, maybe we should put a businessman in charge of everything. Oh, that's right. He's the businessman in the ring. Who cares whether or not he's actually a good businessman? He wrote a book telling the world he was, so it must be true, or at least I'm going to accept it on its face.
Yeah. Ty, where were you going with yours?
I don't know that I was going anywhere. I was just, I was thinking about what Mark said, and as I was thinking about it,
we can't hear you.
There's a microphone right there.
Thanks. Somebody gave me this.
Well, you'll notice all ours are in
it's a really
camera.
great microphone, and it's
Wow, listen to that.
It's not really working very well.
You notice you can see all our mics in camera?
You probably
It's
have your
proximity.
shotgun mic on, which means that all your other microphones are probably dead. So at any rate,
Yeah, please.
this 6 inches or this 6 inches, it's been 6 inches. This is now 3, maybe.
But
anyway.
That's fine.
Anyway, how many times have we said, despite where you're at, oh, he doesn't really mean it. Oh, just give him a chance. He's learning the ropes. He'll get better at it. He's not really meaning that. That's just hyperbole, right? Some of these people, you're right. Unfortunately, they're locked in this loop of a survivor of the abused, right?
This massive Stockholm syndrome.
And it's really unfortunate. It's unfortunate to see. Because I put it in the chat for you guys, but there was a Stephen Miller speak in Colorado, and if you don't think that was almost lifted from a 1940s Nazi Germany,
Oh man, right?
you really need to go back and look at that, and that should tell you all you need to know. For me, somebody who is spewing out this vitriol and this hate, that's enough. Shouldn't that be enough, right? Shouldn't
And
that be enough
why
for you to
isn't it,
go,
though? That's the
I
question,
don't buy
folks.
into that. I don't like that. And the fact that there are people that are voting means people are really leaning that way and looking that way.
Yep.
And that is really unfortunate.
And I think
as well.
that's the unfortunate thing that we don't want to admit to. And that is, over the last 8 years, we have come to a point where now they're saying, the other side is saying, well, you shouldn't be choosing your friends about politics, which was, of course, a very democratic thing to say during the Reagan administration, except for the fact that, and I'm sorry, I will just get political right now, one half of this equation would be perfectly okay with me being dead as a disabled person.
That's true.
I'm weak. I will share this with you guys, even though I told you I wasn't going to. I had to call the fire department today because I fell down and my wife couldn't get me up. I had laid on my driveway for a half hour. I'm weak. I suck off the teat of the system. I give nothing back to my culture and my country.
That's true, though.
And so the question of shouldn't that have been enough with regards to a number of Republican politicians wanting to take away Social Security, wanting to take away Medicare, Social Security. You fucking nut. You pay into Social Security. It's yours.
Yeah, you'd think they would remember that. But no.
And wanting to get rid of Obamacare and enjoy the free market, man.
Yeah.
Weighing 320 pounds or any of a number of other ailments, and you think you're going to afford decent care? So no, let's take away the safety nets. Let's make sure that everybody is at risk, except for the people who can afford to not be at risk. And I mean afford.
Oh, but sure.
Yeah.
Well, even in the
so-
case, go ahead, Ty, please.
No, it wasn't me.
Oh, okay.
Chris.
The brutality there is the vast majority of the people who have signed on for this line of thinking are going to be hurt by it.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the incongruity that drives me nuts every day.
And
how can you be? It's not even cutting off your nose to spite your face. It's cutting off your head to spite everything. You're voting for people whose main goal is to keep you in poverty, keep you dependent upon them.
Yeah,
and I just
that thing.
Yeah, that thing.
It's that thing.
And I think what's really interesting for me here as we wrap this session up is I think that this recording feels weird because right now we all feel really weird.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
But to bring it back around to the question of fandom, this is starting to feel, politics to me is starting to feel like a weird fandom where it's not about policy, it's not about government, it's not even about the economy. It's about who you think is coolest, or who you think is the best representative to convey your resentment.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's what I'm seeing.
And with that, I think we're done. I think we're all just going to hold our breath.
God bless us, everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good night and good luck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to all you, Mr. and Mrs. North America and all the ships at sea. We'll see. I'm going to try to get this out. Obviously, by the time anybody sees this, the thing has happened.
The thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to call it right now because I don't know what I'm going to wake up to. But until next time, everybody, that's Ty, and that's Mark, and that's Chris, and I'm Andy, and this is Keep Your Hat On. And I think now more than ever before, we will probably end up miles from here. I just hope we figure out a way to come in for a safe landing this time. Anyways, talk to you later, everybody, okay? See ya, and vote. Too late to say that, but see ya. Bye.